As war escalates in the Middle East, the Strait of Hormuz, a small sea passage between Oman and Iran, has emerged as a critical choke point for global energy flows, accounting for nearly 20% of global crude oil consumption. Hello and welcome to The Print. I'm Udit Bubna and today I will discuss the impact of closure of Strait of Hormuz on India's energy market. Data from commodity tracking firm Kepler show that India's dependence on this choke point has surged to around 50% of its crude imports and has been rising in recent months. So far this year, India has imported an average of nearly 2.6 million barrels per day from Gulf countries, underscoring the importance of Middle Eastern supplies to India's energy basket. The crude flows in the Strait of Hormuz largely originate from Gulf producers like Saudi Arabia, Iraq, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, and Qatar. Over the past few months, India's reliance on Middle Eastern barrels has risen as Indian refiners pivoted away from Russian volumes, thereby increasing the relative weightage of Gulf crude oil in the import basket. However, this shift has made India more sensitive to disruption in Strait of Hormuz. While India has diversified its crude oil purchases over last few months from Russia, United States, West Africa and Latin America, it comes with a logistical trade-off. Barrels from the Atlantic basin involve substantially longer voyage durations, typically 25 to 45 days compared to roughly 5 to 7 days from the Gulf region. Sumit Ritolia, lead analyst for refining and modeling at global trade intelligence firm Kepler, told The Print, and I quote, "While diversification provides supply continuity, it comes with higher freight exposure and long supply chains. Middle Eastern crude therefore retains a clear logistical advantage and remains structurally important to India's supply stability." With disruption in Gulf supplies, experts say should Middle East crude flows tighten, Indian refiners could pivot back to Russian grades. Kepler data shows that Russian cargoes remain available in Indian Ocean and Arabian Sea region, including volumes held in floating storage vessels. Ritolia of Kepler said, and I quote, "The presence of oil on water in close proximity to Indian ports provides near-term supply elasticity and commercial flexibility. This optionality serves as an important buffer in the event of temporary Gulf disruptions." However, for India, while crude oil exposure remains significant, liquefied petroleum gas poses a higher vulnerability. India imports roughly 80 to 85% of its LPG requirements, with the bulk being sourced from Gulf suppliers such as Qatar, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait, almost all of which comes through the Strait of Hormuz. Ritolia of Kepler said, and I quote, "Unlike crude, India does not maintain large strategic LPG reserves and terminal storage buffers are comparatively limited." He adds, while crude disruptions would likely transmit primarily through prices initially, LPG flows could face tighter logistical constraints more quickly. However, for India, the impact of oil supply crunch will be limited in short term due to availability of strategic petroleum reserves. According to Petroleum Minister Hardeep Singh Puri, reply in Parliament in February, India is holding petroleum strategic reserves of around 74 days, including reserves in caverns, refineries, and floating platforms. The closure of Strait of Hormuz not only impacts India but also the rest of the world. Rajesh Verma, Deputy Director for Tanker Shipping at Brewery Maritime Research, a leading consultant to the maritime and shipping industry, told The Print that any disruption in crude oil supply from the Arabian Gulf is impossible to replace by any other source of supply, as it accounts for 20% of global oil supply. He said, and I quote, "An oil shortage will affect not only India but also the rest of the world, including China. Any disruption would significantly tighten global crude supply, sending oil prices soaring to record highs. Globally, one quarter of seaborne oil trade and about one fifth of total oil and petroleum product consumption flows through the Strait of Hormuz. According to the United States based Energy Information Administration, in the first quarter of 2025 alone, nearly 20.1 million barrels per day of crude oil and petroleum products transited these waters. Most of the crude oil flows from Strait of Hormuz flows eastwards towards Asian countries like China, India, Japan and South Korea. These consumers together account for 69% of all crude oil and natural gas passing through the Strait of Hormuz in 2024. According to the Reuters report today, Brent crude jumped 4.5% to $76 a barrel on Monday. though it had briefly topped $82 at one stage, while US crude climbed 4% to around $70 per barrel. Due to limited alternative export routes, disruption on Strait of Hormuz, even temporary, can have a cascading consequences. When oil cannot transit a major choke point, it can create substantial supply delays, raising shipping and insurance costs and potentially increasing global energy prices. However, according to experts, long-term closure of strait would also have economic repercussions for Iran as well. According to Retolia, the probability of a sustained closure of the strait remains low, as Gulf producers, including Iran, are heavily dependent on uninterrupted export revenues. Iran itself relies substantially on crude sales to China, making prolonged self disruption economically counterproductive. Rajesh Verma of Drury Maritime Research says given the importance of the passage, the US Israel and Iran crisis should be resolved within days, if not weeks. Thank you for watching. For more such videos, please subscribe to the Print's YouTube channel.